Hi everybody and welcome to today's session, XpoNorth Digital's X Short Circuit First Features Funding Q&A. It's great to see you all today and I hope you're all well. My name is Gemma and I'm from the XpoNorth Digital team. XpoNorth Digital is Highlands and Islands Enterprises mechanism for specialist digital support for the creative and heritage economies across the Highlands and Islands region, and the project is delivered by Ironworks Venue. This workshop is part of HIE's Northern Innovation Hub, which is designed to build on and accelerate business innovation. It is funded through the Inverness and Highlands City Region deal, a joint initiative supported by £315 million of investment from the UK and Scottish governments, Highland Council, HIE and UHI. I am now going to pass over to Jessica Fox, who is our wonderful screen and broadcast specialist from the XpoNorth Digital team.
Thanks so much, Gemma. Welcome, everyone. So excited to have you here. We have two very special guests. We have Julia, who is a filmmaker, and Wilma, who is a talent scout for Short Circuit. And we're going to talk today about the First Features Fund. And before we begin, I always find it kind of helpful to explain in your own words. Julia and Wilma, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, well, I go first, Julia. Thanks so much, Jessica, and thanks for inviting me along today. It's really lovely to be able to talk to people, that are out with the Central Belt. So thank you so much. My name's Wilma Smith. I'm one of the talent execs at Short Circuit. My background, I'm a writer, director, and animator myself. I've been making films for the last 25 years. My background has always been in talent development also, with working in community development arts projects for kids, teenagers of all ages. And prior to coming to Short Circuit, I was the filmmakers program manager at GMAC Film with Little Pictures.
Brilliant. Wilma, thank you so much. That's a really interesting background. So you're hands-on a filmmaker, you know how it is, and also how wonderful to be a talent scout too and develop talent. Julia, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hello, everyone. I'm Julia. I started in theatre and I'm still in theatre as a writer, director, and as an actor. And I've been working in theatre for nearly 20 years. And about 6 years ago, started transitioning into screen. Started off writing mainly for telly, and then started making films, short films as well. And I'm here with because I've got my first feature in development with Short Circuit right now.
That's so exciting and very interesting that you have a background in theater. I can't wait to dive in a little bit more about your project. And I know folks here probably have loads of questions. And while Wilma and Julie, we have you both here, I just want to welcome people to start leaving questions in the chat box below. And I promise at the end of the session, I will get to them. Again, my name is Jessica Fox. I'm a film sector specialist and also a filmmaker. The First Features Fund is an incredible resource that I think a lot of people within the Highlands Islands should start engaging with and participating with. So can you tell us, Wilma, a little bit about what is it? What is the fund? What is the scheme?
Okay, so at Short Circuit, we have two schemes. We've got Sharp Shorts, which is for a short film format, and we've got First Features. And the First Features is for what we look for there is a single project work of fiction, either in live action or animation. And there's two strands of funding that you can go with. So you can go with early development or further development. And basically we are looking for people to apply with these single project form proposals, with the capability of it being for theatrical release and for it being, an appeal for an international audience. And we are looking also for projects that have got, really good, strong, original ideas in genres as well. So we can talk a wee bit about that later on, I suppose, but there's we do receive quite familiar genres, so we're looking for people to think out the box, but with their own unique voice, you know, so for new writers. And you can apply as an individual writer director, or you can apply as a team.
That's so good to know, because first feature is always like a really big step for people, and it's wonderful to have a resource there that helps. Before we get to Julia, what does it look like to participate? If you do get accepted, what is the process? What do you receive? Oh, Wilma, maybe, or Julia, can you take that? So when you apply, what do you?
I'm so sorry. I've just had my I've got my phone from the school is phoning me.
Oh no! Oh no!
Would you mind just me texting my husband? Just
no,
sorry,
please.
everyone.
Go for it. No, please.
I
Well,
totally
maybe
understand that one, because I've got children myself, and whenever I get a school phone call, I completely switch off. So your question is, what do you receive? So early development is for treatment to first draft. The maximum amount of money is £5,000.
Okay.
The further development is a second draft and beyond. I should also say first draft. Let me backtrack there. Treatment is maximum of £5,000 that you can apply for. The first draft side of it that you can apply for is maximum of £15,000. And you do not have to have a producer or a production company attached. And then further development, which is the next part, is for second draft and beyond. And you do need to have a producer or a production company attached to that one.
Got it. Okay, that's really good to know. And my last question before we move on to Julia is, you mentioned a couple of things that make you a really good candidate. So you said, original voice, maybe genre, thinking about an international appeal or audience. In terms of the people applying, their background, do you have to have done a short before? Is it good that people are already in the industry? Are there certain things that make you maybe a little bit more of an appropriate candidate for this scheme?
Yes, Jessica. Yeah, so it is good to have like a short, or like a catalogue of work that like a track record in short film, or another narrative based medium, some acclaim or some industry recognition in that. So for example, you might have an established career in documentary or TV or theatre or literature, or some sort of other kind of visual performing arts, and that you're able to demonstrate a significant experience of writing a dramatic narrative. That is obviously really the key.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And so, Julia, tell us a little bit about the process of what it was like both applying and experiencing because you're currently in the program.
Yeah, I'm in the first stage, phase 1. So I applied twice with the same project. I applied with a producer attached previously, and got rejected, but got quite clear notes on that rejection, which was helpful. So and then a wee anecdote. I went off to this amazing, if anyone's heard of Less is More, this amazing European writers development thing, they did a session, Screen Scotland did a session in Moniac Moor, just outside of Inverness.
Oh, nice.
Well, I say it was nice. It was like so intense. Oh my God, it was like a week of filmmakers, and like that's a place for poets who don't talk to each other, right? Yeah. Here you had like 12 filmmakers in a room. Just, it was so intense. I think I was the first one to cry in the first hour on the Monday. And by the Saturday, everyone had cried. We'd shared many bodily fluids. Anyway, so at the end of that, and then the deadline for the short circuit, for the first features was like, I think the following Monday, and I came home from Moniac Moor and I was like, I'm just going to reapply. And I got up the notes from the rejection, and obviously I'd worked on it for a week, and I just splurged. I don't think it was a very coherent application at all, but it was sort of full of passion, and it was obviously I'd been through this like week with with less is more, but also with all these other filmmakers. And I was just all the ideas, all the themes, and I, just kind of splurged it out. And then amazingly got offered the money. And after that point had to be a bit more coherent about it.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe the lesson there is there's something about when you're talking about Wilma about your voice, there's something about that genuine voice, your genuine perspective that was coming through. So tell us a little bit about what it's like being on the program. Do you receive support as you're redrafting things or going from treatment to script? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm coming up to just a little over a year since I got this phase, got the grant, got onto the development program, and I really wanted to work with a script editor, and I was very clear about, I really had one in mind, who was Marilyn Milgram, who I was really, really keen to work with. And she wasn't available until, I think, March. She wasn't available to work on it until March. So I worked on it on my own from, say, around this time till March, with a bit of help from, it wasn't Wilma then, but from Short Circuit. And I would say that was a bad idea.
Because, why was that?
Because I was sort of, I knew who I wanted to work with, and I knew that I was in this stage where I needed to really be, where sort of everything was open, this kind of, when you're in this treatment stage. I had all these ideas, and there were so many paths I could have gone down at that point, and I went a bit too far down one path. And when I finally got Marilyn to work with me on it, she really brought me back to stage one. And she was, even before stage one, she was like, come on, let's go right back to the beginning. And then partly, I think, because I really admire Marilyn, and she's a mature woman who's worked in the industry for a long, long time. She took quite a kind of mother hen approach to me. So it really took me under her wing, and she was like, I'm not releasing you. I'm not letting you talk to anyone until you know what story it is that you're burning to tell. And she was like, I don't want anyone else getting inside your thoughts yet, which I think was helpful. If extremely frustrating also, but I adore her. So I was like, tell me anything. Tell me anything, I'll do it. And then, so she really worked with me intensely for a few months. And then I handed what we came up with together to yourself, Wilma, and Miriam at Short Circuit just a couple of months ago. And from that point, I've had a lot of hands-on help, particularly from Wilma, really looking at the story, looking at how to make it unique, looking at, brought animation into it, really thinking about how to differentiate it from we can talk later about the other films that it's like, or whatever, that have come out from Scotland recently. And that has been, I would say that phase of the development has been really great, because I've felt like, if Marilyn was about holding me close, this has been about me really flying with it and finding what it could be, what the film could be. And that has been and that's been with a lot of support from Short Circuit. So
gosh, Julia, that's amazing. That's really amazing. And I want to go a little bit into your background about where you're from and your story in a second. But I think just before we dive into that too much, there's a question that was on my mind as well, Wilma, so in our chat box, that I just want to bring to you. So does having written a self-funded feature drama that has screened at festivals exclude you from participation? I guess, what's the definition of a first-time filmmaker?
First-time filmmaker is when you are commissioned with funding. So if you've made yourself funded feature, which that's my background. I made self-funded, zero budget features in the late 1990s and early noughties, so that won't rule you out. You still be able to apply.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's really, really important. And the other thing, are there any things that can make you stand out for your application? So in terms of the way you apply, what you prefer receiving from treatment to script, are there different parts that are, I guess, more competitive than others in terms of application?
Yeah, I mean, it is worth saying this is a very competitive fund, okay? And I think I just want to kind of touch back on what Julia was saying, you know, the fact that Julia applied first time and got rejected and then applied again the second time. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And that's been, you know, rejection is very much part and parcel of this industry. And, you know, I've had vast experience in it myself, applying for things and then not getting it, and then applying again and then getting it. So that's something very, very important to talk about. What makes things stand out is that kind of bold, compelling fictional story. And as I said, either in live action or in animation, and really has that ambition and potential to reach that international audience. But things that kind of make an application stand out is, you know, things like the capability of it obtaining a theatrical or video release certification, capability of qualifying as you know, the British UK film tax relief, the BFI diversity standards, both on and off screen, is also very important. The Scottish significance, cultural significance, makes it stand out. But things also, just what Julia was saying, is really digging in deep to what your story is. So I'm going back on to your actual story, what you want to tell. And it's things like, you know, if you're submitting a short proposal, a short outline, you know, it's a lot to kind of try and cram everything in. But some of the things I want you to think about is, what is your story? What is the actual story that you're trying to tell? The characterizations. So think a bit about your characters as well. Tell us a little bit about your characters. The structure. What is the structure of the story? And your cinematic language around that. So we're thinking film, we're thinking cinema. So really try and get that cinematic language across in your proposal. I feel as if I'm asking an awful lot.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
But these are the sorts of things. Sometimes if it's just in your head and you've not articulated it onto paper, it's sometimes it's not visible. So think about those key elements and really, what is your story?
Okay, I know this might be a little controversial before we go back to Julia, but I've noticed in my own work when we're going into pitch meetings, more and more of the images that we're using to pitch are actually AI created. Is there rules in terms of your application about if you use AI as an aid?
To be honest, Jessica, we've not even discussed AI. Okay. So that's really interesting. I've not heard of that one before. I mean, certainly what is really good for your application pack is for you to submit a mood board, you know, to see visuals, you know, like even if it's a 1 A4 page of images that you source off of Google, or I don't want to be controversial by saying
I know. Sorry, we may not, you don't have to go there, but okay.
But yeah, definitely recommend that visuals are good. And I think when you're working in a visual medium, you should be working with visuals anyway.
Absolutely. So Julie, can you tell us a little bit about your story? So we talked a lot about what makes a successful application. It would be really helpful to hear your story, what you're working on.
Yeah, sure. It's called Jump Club, and it's a coming of age comedy, and it is about an Australian Scottish lassie, 13-year-old, who loves to swim, but is afraid of the sea, and she lives on the Isle of Lewis, which is my motherland, so she's surrounded by the sea. That's ultimately the storyline, is her moving from swimming in the pool to swimming in the sea. But really that's a metaphor, I suppose, for her growing up different and finding her own way to grow up.
I want to watch this. Sign me up. That sounds so good. And you're in you said you're in the treatment phase.
Yeah. So we're I'm hoping we'll hand in the treatment to Screen Scotland by the end of this year before
Oh,
the next one.
amazing.
So with a view to hopefully thanks Tom hopefully be moving on to script next year.
That's great. That's so exciting. And you mentioned a little bit previously when we were doing a little chat beforehand that making it original and separating it from other stories being released in Scotland is important. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, probably good for Wilma to chat more about this, but it's a coming of age story, which obviously there are lots of those pitches and lots of those stories out there and lots of those films. So it was a big challenge to try and find a way for that to distinguish that from the genre. And I think it's been quite interesting working with Marilyn, who the script editor who I work with, who was very much about, now you follow this structure and this is how you write a coming of age story, and you hit all these points and you have this number of beats in this act, and then you have your unsettling incident, and then you do this. And so I handed that in, and Wilma was like, yeah, I've heard it all before. Just tell me something new. And I was like, well, okay, so how do I take this and actually make it, breathe some life into it, and bring my own unique experience of growing up as a Scottish Australian person on the Isle of Lewis. So there's been a bit of work of kind of finding the uniqueness in that regard. There's also something that kind of happened halfway through this year, which was a bit of a hiccup, but ultimately I think is a good thing, and that is we should talk about Selkies, shouldn't we, Wilma? I'm just gonna raise that there as a talking point, because I've learned a lot. But there was a film called Silent Roar, came out earlier this year. It was premiered at Edinburgh Film Festival, and that's based on Lewis, and about, as a coming of age, I guess you'd call it a comedy drama, that was also about the sea. It was about surfing. So there were loads of crossovers that when I watched it, for various reasons, I mean, it's got it's a film that's got great things about it. But when I watched it, I felt really upset, and I was like, oh no, this is it's so the thematic, even though it's a completely different film, and of course it's the film that I would make is going to be completely different from many reasons. I was like, there are just too many crossovers. How do I distinguish it from this film? And it's been really great chatting specifically with Wilma about how to separate that. And one of the decisions that Wilma and I are going to talk about later on this week was about sort of really looking at what I've been doing in the last couple of weeks, is really looking at the story and setting it not in generic Lewis, but actually setting it in my hometown.
Oh, lovely.
Away, which is a different, which it's sort of universal small town feel, but it's got a very distinctive identity, is completely different from Lewis as an island. Is still coastal, still has all these things, but kind of opens it up and is more diverse, which is also great. So it was sort of really thinking about specifics rather than kind of broad brush strokes. I suppose that's maybe what I've learned in the last couple of weeks.
No, I think that's a really good lesson to learn, that especially if you're trying to make something authentic or have that sense of authenticity, specificity is really important, especially with your own knowledge of the place. And there's always that catch-22 a little bit, because when just coming from where my perspective, when you're looking at international distribution, it's really helpful to point to previous examples of films that are like yours that did well. But at the same time, you also need to make an original piece that is not like something that came out before. So if you can get that difference right, it actually is helpful when there's a trend of films coming out from a particular place with particular themes that seem to be coming up.
Yeah, I think that's actually reminds me of something. One thing I did earlier on this year with encouragement from Miriam at Short Circuit was to go to Glasgow Film Festival and just talk to everyone and pitch the story to everyone who would listen to me for 5 minutes and get their thoughts. And I got really brilliant thoughts from someone whose email I have, but whose name I can't remember, and I think is BFI maybe. But anyway, but she was great, and she was just like, tell me what it's not. Just and if
Yeah.
you're going to pitch it, you know, if it is a coming of age comedy, we've all, you know, just tell me how it's different from all the other
Yeah.
ones I'm going to be, and that was really helpful. I should probably
That's
feed that into my treatment, shouldn't I, Wilma?
well, again, I agree with Tom. I think you pitched it well. So there's more questions coming in thick and fast. So we have, how important is the relevancy of subject matter to the current times? Does it have to be zeitgeisty?
No, I don't think it has to be relevant. I mean, one of the things we're really looking for this time round is a real range and diversity of the genres. You know,
Yeah.
as Julia said, we get a lot of period, and we get a lot of coming of age dramas. We also get a lot of selkie influence stories as well.
Interesting.
So we're not saying that you can't apply with these projects, because obviously everyone's got their unique perspective in how they tell it, but we certainly want to encourage people to think about you know, different genres, you know, for example, sci-fi, fantasy, thriller, comedy, action, romantic, drama, animation as well. So yeah, I've kind of lost your question there, Jessica, sorry.
No. I think the question was, like, does it need to be, how relevant does it need to be the current times?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of unique to how what your perspective is in telling that story. So, you know, yeah, no, it's not solely based on that or anything like that. No.
Okay, thank you very much, Wilma. That's great. So if applying with a director and producer, do they also need to be first-time filmmakers?
No, they don't. The producer doesn't have to, can have already produced before.
Okay.
But yeah, the director, this would be their first feature.
And actually, if you are applying, I'm going to add on to Armando's question. If you are applying as a team, and you don't have as much experience as a director, is it helpful to have a producer applying with you that has the track record? Could they make up the experience difference?
Yes, experience really does help, and obviously, if you're coming together as a team, as a package, it's in a sense it strengthens. If you're coming in from of having different kind of track records and industry recognition, so yeah, that would be advisable. Yeah.
Okay, and then Scott would like to know, what if you already have written a first draft of a feature script, but you want to revisit it? Would this still be eligible for development fund if you were to use the first draft to rewrite a treatment?
Definitely, Scott. That's a really, really good question, and a very relevant question, because I think in the past a lot of people apply with, you know, they've already written the script, and they can become really overly attached to it, or they could have already written the treatment, okay, and they become really overly attached. Now, what's really important about Short Circuit and First Features and Sharp Shorts as well is that this is a development programme, and so you've got to be really quite open to the development and the collaboration of working with the talent executives and the wider reading team, etc. So it's not at all a bad idea to kind of go back to the beginning, because again, sometimes if you're working on your own. Writing can be, I mean, I would dare say everybody would agree, when you're writing on your own, can be quite isolating, so you can get quite trapped in on your own thoughts. And so, yeah, where you might think your project is at treatment stage or at script stage, actual fact, there's a lot of unpicking to do to find the actual essence of the story, or develop more of the characters, etc. So it's not a bad idea to think about applying for that early development with the view to develop it.
That's a great question. And so you brought on the idea of writing with people, or maybe having writing partners or collaborating. If you do come as a pair, if someone is not based in Scotland but you are, is that okay if you have like an international pairing?
I think it's changing now. Bear in mind, I'm still fairly new, but it used to be that you had to be based in Scotland. But I think, in actual fact, that in that case, I think you can have one other person. But if anyone's asking that question specific, can you maybe actually email hello@shortcircuit.scot just for that clarification on that? I don't want to put that.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Julia, what now? Which may sound like a terrifying question, or maybe your least favorite question, but in terms of where you are and going forward, what now?
Yeah, so as I said, we've got, I'm aiming to hand this treatment in by the end of this month, really, before Christmas. The treatment is a very well beated out beat sheet, ultimately, a very detailed beat sheet. So hoping that, I think you keep me right on whether this is how it works, Wilma, but I think that Screen Scotland read it and then they feedback whether it goes to script or not. Am I right about that?
Yes, so it's the wider team. So it's myself, Miriam, the talent execs, and the wider team at Screen Scotland. Yeah.
And so hopefully they will give the go ahead to move to first draft.
That's so exciting. Is it possible to work with Short Circuit throughout the whole process, in terms of going from treatment to script to maybe finding to pairing with a production company?
I think you hand over I'm not sure, Wilma.
You eventually hand over. So Short Circuit deal with the early development and up to the first draft and the polished first draft with revisions. And then if it goes into further development, then second draft onwards, it then goes over into Screen Scotland's slate.
That's great. Thank you both. Really, thank you both so much. So we're going to turn it mostly to the floor now for questions. I see more have come in. I just want to make sure that we have the time and space while we have both of them here for you guys to ask all the questions that you need. So we're going to go through some of them. Rosie would like to know, can you apply for Sharp Shorts and First Features at the same time?
Yes, you can. Yeah. Yeah. We've had cases where people, yes, you can do that. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And in early development level, is it always advisable to apply for funding to do the treatment first, or can you apply for first draft funding, which would include doing a treatment?
So I would advise you that if you're going to do that, to go for the treatment first.
Okay.
Apply for the treatment first. Now, part of that as well, you have to submit a kind of rough budget to pay for the writer's fee, which is the current industry standard of about 2,700 for a writer's fee. And then on top of that, you've got the, other expenses, maybe, for example, like a script editor or specific research that you want to do. So I would certainly advise starting from the start rather than going straight to, or asking for the double whammy of it both, I suppose.
Thank you for that. Okay. And Julie, if you were going to give advice to yourself who was first time applying to short circuit, what would you, with the knowledge you have now, what would you give?
Wow, going back to first time applying, I think being really clear and spending the time on what, as Wilma says, what is the story, like what is the core, what's the elevator pitch, really, and being very clear about that. I think that would have been, I might have got money earlier, who knows? But then that combined with the second application where I really was like, it was a splurge of images, and there was a, you know, that was a passionate application that, as I say, wasn't very coherent, but obviously some people read it and saw a drive there and a passion for it that was perhaps set it aside from other applications or other stories.
Yes. So don't, maybe that's real. Don't ring fence the passion.
Yeah.
Let it go forth for the application.
Definitely. And I think there's always different ways people approach their creative writing, you know, like how they approach writing. And certainly for me, kind of like getting it all out there is how I like to start off with myself. So but it really is important to really nail what is the story that you're trying to tell. Yeah. And trying to articulate that into your application.
Absolutely. You know, I always find it helpful. Maybe you found this going to Glasgow and chatting with everyone about it. I always found it helpful to talk story first. So as you're talking it out to people, you can clearly read on their face if they're engaged or where they're engaged or if they're not engaged. And it is a really good litmus test to see where you're hitting the mark and maybe where you're losing people. Scott has a great question. What are the guidelines around the level of explicit sexual or violent subject matter of the stories? Would Short Circuit fund a Gasper No film, for instance?
I don't know if because I'm quite new in this role, I've certainly not, like Wilma, I've been here, I've not received any sort of material like that. So, and I don't know from the past if that has been the case. So I can't quite comment on that one.
Might be a good one to email as well. Questions to that email you gave it. Was it
hello@shortcircuit.scot, but that is a very good question.
Okay, yes, and a good one to make the most of that email. So Julie, maybe this is for you. Will you receive feedback on the treatment if you are rejected? So did you receive feedback?
From the treatment?
From the rejected application.
Oh, from the so the rejected application, I got really, really clear feedback actually, and I used that to inform when I reapplied. I went back and I looked at what it was that they felt they wanted more of, or what didn't work, or questions that they had, and tried to answer them. Okay. But I don't know if I get feedback on a rejected treatment. I hope I'll never find out. Wilma, do you know?
No, I mean, certainly we always get feedback. Certainly when you're on board, the process is that we regularly meet up and feedback in person. So
that's amazing. And, you know, just to highlight, like, given how many applications you have, I think it's pretty wonderful that you guys take the effort to give feedback to everyone. That is a lot of work, and very, very impressive, and I'm sure very appreciated. So if a treatment is for a continuation of an already existing character belonging to a literary estate, does that qualify?
Yes.
Would it mean it's not original?
No, that still qualifies. However, you must submit with the relevant chain of titles with that IP. Okay. So you must have the kind of clearances and that kind of, obviously, a documentation that gives you permission to use that.
That's really, really great. And so it says in the guidelines that projects set internationally are acceptable. Are these projects at a disadvantage to those set in Scotland at an application phase?
No, they're not, because as you know, you can set it out with Scotland, but it is important to think about what perhaps the Scottish element could be within that story. So yeah, think about the well, for example, terrible, it's the name slips me. After Sun, for example, is a Scottish father and daughter on set abroad, for example, you know.
That is nice. And I would say, I know in a lot of organizations I'm speaking to for my day job, people are really keen to engage with the Highlands and Islands based stories. So given our audience today, really that's kind of like a superhero power you have in your pocket that I would make the most of.
Jessica, see, just while you're saying that, it's the same for sharp shorts as well. And just like what you're saying quite rightly, you're really at an advantage, especially with tapping into the Gaelic language, for example.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah, that's great. So I'm speaking for Liza. I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about and working on ideas, my story, but haven't quite worked out the exact ending. Is that still okay to apply with maybe a story that's there, but the ending is needing development?
That's a really good question. And to be quite honest with you, I also find sometimes at this sort of stage, you know, I do kind of struggle with knowing exactly what my ending might be. So I would say, if you can try and apply with as much of your ending, what you think the ending could be in place, that would be great. But again, if you're applying, especially with the early development, the whole idea is to develop. So I think kind of articulating that perhaps in your personal statement or something, that might be a good idea. I don't know what your thoughts are there, Julia.
Yeah, I think in terms of the development that my film has gone on this last year, it's very different from what I applied with, and the opening images and closing images are completely different images now. I mean, they're still in the same world, you know, they're still water-based, they're still in the sea, you know, but they're still focused on a central girl, but like the actual what they're doing is very different. So I'd say, and I guess I've always been encouraged to share, if I'm going to pitch anything, share an opening and closing image, because you're working from A to B, aren't you? And at least it gives you a direction of travel that you might go in, but knowing that it's probably going to change through development.
Yeah, but I think at this stage, especially if it's, you know, like focused on a character, it would be quite good to you know, really work on it before. And by the way, the deadline is at 10 a.m. on Monday, the 8th of January. So if you could keep working on it to try and solve out what that conclusion could be, because that could be really quite crucial to what the actual whole overall story is, you know.
That sounds really good. You know, Julia, you're getting me think there's a book that you may have read already called Phosphorescence.
No, I have not read this.
Australian author, about her experiences in the ocean, and it's really lovely. I just think that maybe there's some kindred vibes there that you might enjoy. Different enough, but really, and she talks about the history of phosphorescence. It's so interesting.
And in actual fact, Jessica, just going back onto that last question, that's exactly what Julia's talking about, is talking to other people.
Yeah.
In actual fact, sometimes even talking to people that might not actually be involved in the world of writing and film, I actually find is really, really interesting. I actually often work with scientists, because I find that their take on things, I'm not solely singling out scientists, but what I'm trying to say is, talking out ideas, you can then end up, you know, finding nuggets of information like what you've just given there.
Yeah, you're totally right. I also have a thing for science, talking to scientists. I totally understand. It's nice to get different minds on a story because you hear just really interesting things. Okay, so we have a couple more questions, and I encourage people, I think we may end the session a little early, so if you have a burning question, please put it in the chat box. And so can you apply with more than one idea? If so, how many? And can you submit a pitch deck with your application of the overall idea?
Yes, you can submit a pitch deck or a mood board, as I mentioned earlier. You can apply with more than one idea. I would kind of recommend, though, that if you're applying, not to apply with too many. I would say maximum of 2. And I think there's a little bit of a kind of I mean, obviously you're kind of bringing out more opportunities if you're applying with more than one, but at the same time it's also good to kind of have that single focus on one project as well, that you're really kind of wanting to drive forward. Same applies for sharp shorts as well. So yeah, it's worth thinking about in those terms.
That's great. Thank you, Wilma. That's really great. So Tom wants to know, is there any way to access the training skills experts without applying or taking part in the fund? I would jump on this one. I would say if you're based in the Highlands and Islands, XpoNorth Digital has an amazing resource, which is the Sector Specialist Scheme, where if you go on their website, you can sign up, and they're specialists in all kinds of fields, whether it's publishing, film, fashion, heritage, and they'll get you to places where we can advise you and also send you on to other experts. So there's that. Wilma, I don't know if there's a way to harness the knowledge of short circuit without actually applying to the scheme.
We have, I mean, obviously keeping toe with our social media, and we've got a wonderful events team who we partner with, Glasgow Film. They're a wonderful events team, so keep an eye on opportunities that are coming up through, events that are coming up from that, or digital surgeries, where you can have a one-to-one with like myself or Miriam Newman, who's the other talent exec. Also, I want to kind of touch back on going along to your local film festivals and events there is really super important, because, you know, a big part of your own development is actually watching other films. So, and obviously the networking is really hugely important, meeting people. I'm just going to quickly tell a quick story. I mean, I've always gone along to like the Glasgow Film Festival as part of the industry programme, and sometimes I'll have a look at the industry programme that specific day when it's on, and I'll be looking, I think, I don't know if I really want to go to this event because this doesn't really interest me, but I'll go anyway. And 9 times out of 10, I come out of that event and I think that was a brilliant session. I learned so much. You know, it's like one of those cases of, you know, going for a night out when you're not looking forward to it or something, or the person sitting next to me in the audience, I've ended up chatting to them and really clicking and having a really great relationship, you know, professional relationship with them in some shape or form. So I would really encourage you to do that as part of your own development as well.
That's great, Wilma. Thank you so much. And just a couple more before we end. So is there a particular format you guys expect for the treatment pitch or for the application or script people hand in?
So the script, it'll be on the website, but you apply online. There is access accessibility that we've got in place. So it's on the website, but if there's any questions at all about access, again, please email hello@shortcircuit.scot. Format wise, it would be Word doc or a PDF that you would submit. You would attach onto the online application. So there's not a format as such, but obviously like a kind of clearly documented, a clear document which has your outline proposal or a kind of shorter treatment or whatever, and also your personal statement.
Okay, that's great. And final question, which comes in two parts. I think you mentioned the idea of diversity of story, and maybe Julia, you might be able to speak to this a bit, but does a male or female leads in stories make a difference in terms of their points of view and what's attractive for potential readers or the application?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Wilma lead on female-led storylines, I suppose, narratives, but I think we're in general, the sector and all the arts are looking to platform voices that are less commonly heard.
Yes.
And that includes female and minority gender identifying people's stories from that demographic, and also non-white stories. In terms of Jump Club, one of the things I've enjoyed doing in the last few months, there was always a character in it who was Thai, who works in the Thai restaurant. I'm friends with the woman who runs the Thai restaurant who used to run the Thai restaurant in Stornoway. And one of the things I've done is gone deeper into the world of the Thai restaurant.
Oh, nice.
And foregrounding the story of Kai's mum. And that's been quite enjoyable to do that, and has also been a way of distinguishing the film from the previous film I mentioned, which was, quite similar territory.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's really interesting. And it kind of goes to your point again about the more specific you get about the place or the people, actually looking towards what your resources are, where you guys are, the more specific you get, the more diverse it becomes, because no one has that story or that life or that place that you do, or the perspective that you do. So that's really wonderful. And the other question, it was, would having Scottish actors or crew be attached when you apply be beneficial to your application?
I mean, certainly, but it's interesting if you're speaking with people and you can mention that in your personal statement, but it's not essential by any means. So really, it's about the story. Your application with the actual story for the script or the treatment. So, but certainly, that is of interest. So you could maybe put that in your personal statement.
Thank you both so much, Julia and Wilma, for joining us today. You've been so open and super helpful. And thank you for all your questions today too. For folks who I guess were referred on to that email, could you just say the email one more time, Wilma? It's
hello@shortcircuit.scot.
That's got great. And
Julia, I just also, just very quickly, there is some points, as in you must be aged 18 or over, based or resident in Scotland, not in full-time education. So I just wanted to.
That's great. And apply again. I think that idea of persistence is really
super important. And it's I'm only talking for myself, but rejection is part and parcel of what we do. Okay.
It is.
And it's really important to have a really I don't quite know how to say it, because everybody experiences it or receives it in different or takes it on board in different ways, but certainly my attitude has always been apply and apply and apply, a wee bit like a squeaky wheel.
That's great. I think that's really good advice to end on. And Julia, we wish you so much luck with the treatment coming up and your script. I cannot wait to watch it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Good
you,
luck.
everyone. Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you all.
Bye.
Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and thank you to Wilma and Julia and Jessica. Please do visit our website, www.XpoNorth.co.uk, where you can look at our events section and sign up to our newsletter to be kept up to date with future events and news. Also on the website, we have our video archive with lots of extremely interesting content, as well as an inquiry form, which Jessica made reference to, for specialist sector support. Also, make sure to connect with us on Facebook, X, also known as Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And once again, thank you ever so much, everybody, for joining us today.